My name is Ron Angeles. I grew up on 22nd and Thistle, right here. And I went to Chief Sealth High School back in 1968. Went to Denny back before that. And so this is my neighborhood. But since leaving home for a while, I went to Cleveland and worked and got hooked on community organizing and issues, but then decided, you know what, I want to come back to Seattle. And when I did, I was fortunate enough to work for the City of Seattle. Back then it was called the Community Service Center Program, later became the Department of Neighborhoods. And last year I retired after 32 years working I met Jim actually over in Rainier Valley, southeast Seattle, back in about 1979. After about 9 or 10 years in Rainier Valley, I was the district coordinator over in West Seattle. I had an office in the Junction, and then I think about 14 or 15, maybe 16 years ago, I can't do the math anymore, I started working in the Delridge district. And, you know, I mean, a blessing. So fortunate to be able to come back to the neighborhood that I grew up in. And in doing that, I met so many great people. And like Jim said, it's about what you all are already doing. You're connected. You're already connected with organizations. It's a matter of just making connections. And it's incredible what Delridge has been able to do, in the last decade. But anyway, what I wanted to do today was convene a panel of some of the people that I've met in all these years that I've been working in the Department of Neighborhoods. And some of them I've known for quite a while, and some I've met in probably the last 2 or 3 years. And so our first panelist is Sili Savusa. I met Sili when she was Sili Mana'o, and actually I met Sili's parents before I met Sili when I was helping to organize the Samoan community over in Rainier Valley. But Sili now is a resident in White Center, lives in the White Center area. She for several years, decades, was the manager of the Family Center at Southwest Youth and Family Services, and now she has this new gig, okay, as the new executive director at the White Center Community Development Association. I asked the panelists to provide me with a little bit of a bio, but Sili sent me a quote, okay, and it was a quote that was actually in the news release that was sent out. It was probably in publications, but it said here, quote, "All my work in human services and community development has allowed me to build an extensive network of important relationships. But perhaps the strongest experience I bring is as a resident in this gifted and capable community. My unique skill set, as well as my perspective as a resident whose family is impacted daily by community issues, uniquely qualifies me for this new and exciting role." So, that's the type of person that we have here in working now in the White Center area. I also have the privilege of also being the coach of Sili's daughter, Miles Savusa, who's on my softball team. I am the head coach of the Green softball team. So I'm semi-retired. But I really enjoy coaching her daughter, and she's just like Sili. She is the leader of my team. So, it gets passed on. The next panelist is Aileen. Aileen, I just met, I think, a couple of years ago, or maybe this year. Okay, but Aileen is doing incredible stuff also up in White Center with the business community. And now Aileen sent me a nice bio also that I'll just read. As a lifelong resident, Aileen was born and raised in White Center, as well as proud alumni of also Chief Sealth High School, go Seahawks. And so in 2003, she was accepted to New York's Platt Institute as a full-ride scholar, and later became a graduate of fine arts. She spent the next couple of years in the music, video, and arts education field in New York. In fall 2006, returned to Seattle and entered the real estate industry. Today, Aileen still remains in real estate today, guiding many sellers, buyers, and landlords in achieving their success with the right mindset in any economy. She also cares deeply for the neighborhood she grew up in and gives back to the community as White Center Food Bank Vice President, White Center Chamber of Commerce Treasurer, Walk Watch Captain, and is currently awaiting her appointment by Dow Constantine, King County Exec, to be the next King County Civil Rights Commissioner for our District 8. While dedicated to moving diverse White Center forward, Aileen is equally dedicated to caring for her mother, Erlinda, in their White Center home. Tony Fragada. Tony I have known since working in West Seattle. Tony is also a graduate of Chief Sealth High School. And Denny. Oh, no. But you know, Tony sent me a very interesting bio. Very poetic. I didn't know that about Tony, but I'll read his bio. If I can find it. I've known, I know that Tony has been associated with the Alki Community Council since I've known him, probably 20 years. Yeah. And here's Tony's bio. My brother and I, growing up in military family, seemed like one long camping trip, on the move, expecting for the unexpected, finding humor in one's mistakes, and enjoying one's fortunes, sensing the good in everyone met, and seeking adventure to come. By the end of the 50s, living on both coasts from the Florida Panhandle to the end of the Aleutian chain, my world was colored by the tastes, smells, and sounds of the human experience. My dad's 6-month retirement in the Philippines immediately returned us to Seattle in '65, a time when you can recognize a person in West Seattle by the car they drove. My outdoor background has given me permission to take risks that verges on stupidity. Shaping the conversation of environmental impact in an urban setting, showing cause for enhanced drainage in a known landslide area, harnessing the talents of neighbors in organizing emergency preparedness, helping neighbors put smiles in projects they accomplish. So I thought that was a really creative bio, most creative bio I've ever read. Thank you. Now our next panelist is Kirk Mead. I met Kirk probably a couple of years ago. And Kirk and I actually worked together on the Delridge Days. Yeah. And Kirk, I think, was at the time representing the Chamber of Commerce. But Kirk has also was a new father last year.
Yeah, 13 months old.
Yeah. And worked at the Westwood Village branch of
Alaska USA Federal Credit Union.
Okay, and now is in the Admiral District working for a similar bank.
Aqua Bank.
Aqua Bank. And is involved in the Admiral Merchants Association.
That's correct. I'm actually the vice president for the Admiral Merchants Association, and I'm treasurer for the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce.
So, Kirk. Well, the basic talk topic of our panelists, what I asked them to think about was, how do they build and sustain organizations in West Seattle's diverse communities? A lot of people don't know that West Seattle is a very diverse community. There's also there's two sides of West Seattle. There's the other side of 35th West Seattle, and then there's kind of like the Delridge side of West Seattle. And so, just in geography, okay, West Seattle is quite a diverse place. But I'm going to just start off by just putting this question to the panel, and you can decide who wants to go first. As you know, there are many communities, ethnic, cultural, business, special needs, nonprofit, large, small, environmental, youth, educational, etc. You have some, I'm knowing you all, okay, you have some relationship with, those different organizations. How do you weave, how do you weave through, this kind of like maze of organizations that are out there, and to bring kind of people together and their actually sometimes controversial interests. So.
Well, you're the bank guy.
Well, the bank guy thinks. No, it's a great question. I've touched. I don't want to overstate this. I've touched a lot of different organizations. I've had a privilege of being able to kind of engage and invest time in very different organizations. Everything from Delaware Chamber Development Association, West Seattle Chamber of Commerce, all these different things. I don't say that to say, wow, I'm super involved. I want to say that one thing that I've noticed is that what makes, at least for me, that experience most beneficial on the selfish end of it is find those nexus of concerns. It's fascinating how many of these organizations, our community organizations, have very similar concerns and challenges. And what's equally as fascinating is how very rarely those challenges are shared amongst and between organizations. So there isn't a lot of communication. So my experience in terms of just how I navigate through that is really trying to, from organization to organization, at least create, for me personally, a consistent message that says we share a concern X with organization Y, right? And maybe we ought to talk to them about our shared concern. And part of that, the part of the point about having a conversation is creating this critical mass, this impetus, the momentum behind initiatives that gets the ball going. It's a lot of talk to say we need to get behind some common concerns. But the reality is that for me, as I've been able to kind of integrate and talk with and engage in a lot of different organizations, I find that I get the most out of it when we start to kind of have conversations that surround very similar concerns and issues. And we get the most done when we're actually able to create that critical mass and push forward on specific issues.
Feels like school out there.
But they all work pretty good.
Hey.
I believe it's really simply down to relationships. I feel very lucky to come back to White Center and really work where I live and live where I work. And it really comes down to relationships and maintaining those relationships. So no matter what organization you represent, we all are still on the same page. Chamber of Commerce works very closely with the CDA, and I believe the food bank is friends with everybody. So I really enjoy, just nurturing the value of relationships. That's what it really comes down to. So, and I'm looking at this question: how do you sustain leadership within organizations? For me, I like looking at the big picture and putting down goals and having everyone accountable and make sure that it's fun. Make sure it doesn't feel like volunteer work. I really like what Jim said. You got to make it fun. So actually, a lot of my, meetups are on an Evite because I think everyone looks forward to an Evite, not a not an appointment time on Google Calendar.
I want you just say a little bit about BOSS.
Right. OSS, I made up. Really, it stands for Business Owners of Sustainable Support. I started that over a year ago, and knowing the personalities of White Center, I know they would rather get together over drinks than 7 o'clock in the morning, breakfast time. So, and really, it attracted a lot of people, a lot of other business owners, as far as I think one time Linwood, Federal Way, and Bellevue. And it was really great that these business owners got to meet the business owners from in and around White Center. It really showed the underestimated resource that we have here. We do have professionals, and we do have a lot of great food, a lot of great resources that should be told about. I believe a lot of people outside of White Center already have this stereotype, don't go there. But really, I think with these sort of gatherings, it really breaks down that stereotype, and people are always, people then feel welcome to come and spend some time. We get a friendly image of the area.
So, building on what Aileen said. Oh, you can hear me? Okay. So, can you all hear me? I have a big mouth, but yeah. Okay. So, the relational piece is really key and critical in working kind of cross profession. The thing that we tend to do, even as individuals that work within our practice, we still silo ourselves out because of the kind of work that we do. And as much as we can, we need to look at when you're working in the community, you look at it as a family, and that everything that we do, regardless of what it is relevant to each other because of the different things that communities have to deal with on a daily basis. So, I'm the executive director of CDA, and it's totally relevant to what's happening in education. It's totally relevant to what's happening in health services. And I know that's the... Oh, sorry. Huh? There you go. And, we do that a lot. And I find myself in conversations in meetings that I participate in, I hear myself saying, don't forget about this group, or don't forget about this work that's happening in the community, or don't forget what's happening, within, immigration. And that's hard. It's hard to have a conversation even around race and social justice when you're meeting about outcomes that you want to see as an agency. And so, but that's so critical and so central to a lot of the work that we do. And as much as I can help support folks from other areas of work, it only makes my work better and more meaningful to the families that are impacted by what we do. So, even though he works at a bank, I think that's totally relevant to what I do as a CDA in terms of helping families, making sure we have a strong community, and making sure that community exists with strong services that impacts everybody in a positive way. So, again, going back to the relational piece, that's critical. And I also want to add on, building on what Jim had said earlier in the workshop, that we look at communities as gifts. I used to sit on the Highline School Board, and I just came off last year. And the biggest thing I would always say to teachers and to administration, these kids are leaders, and you need to look at them as leaders. If you start to work with think about those labels, you've already created a barrier for this child. And so if we assume, as adults in this community and as individuals in this community, if we assume we're looking at a community of leaders, we've already created a strong place to start from in terms of building their relationships with families and businesses. And so we are of that deficit mindset in a lot of ways, and the more that we can work with each other. You can It sounds like family. And the more that we can really change the way our thinking around the way that we work with communities and families, I think it just creates a more comfortable space for folks to have a conversation and to meet each other.
So, hello. I guess that's not working. Hello. Can you hear me? Anyway, every so often, poetic. I work as an engineer, so poetic is not part of the vocabulary of the day. What I do it every day, and I began to realize that what weave means to me is I lose my hair. I should probably get a weave because anyway, it's one of those. That's the best thing I can think about, weaving. But in terms of kind of putting things together, it's a curious thing for me. As part of that bio, I told Ron I just turned 60. I have all these stories. I would have gone on forever, but one of the most. So after we moved from the Philippines, I had a job in high school working in a cannery in Alaska, and so we were split up into different bunkhouses. So we had different, in terms of. There was a white bunkhouse, there was a Filipino bunkhouse, a Japanese bunkhouse, and a native bunkhouse. So, and I had remembered that from growing up in Florida. So we were all segregated. It was, I couldn't believe there was segregated, workplace still. So, but through that, understanding what the commonality was, the stories were repeated, relationships, and understanding what the strengths of people are rather than who they are as race. It allowed me to kind of excel, and I find that that's the energizing part of me. Is I see in people a certain piece that says they can excel at whatever they do. Is you just gotta plant a little seed in there, and when you plant that seed, it just grows. There's nothing engineering about it. It's just a phenomena that is so wonderful if you see it. And if you can see that backdrop in Alaska, working in Alaska, it was kind of fun because you can go out and fish and catch a 100-pound halibut off the dock. It's such a natural environment where if you let things grow or let things and kind of help things along, people arise. And the other day we were talking about the sand on Alki Beach. And I was kind of reluctant to go talk about it because of all the budget cuts. I'm thinking, I'm glad we still have sand on Alki Beach. But the hard to harness that. The guy felt good after he did his presentation. And how do you harness that energy? Because there's some value of people feeding into something that they feel fervent about. And how do you make that change? In one of the seminars, I think Tom was talking about how he would write letters to the city and how nothing ever happened if you write a letter. As it turns out, in working together, it's funny how we find little commonalities, and people perk up, and all of a sudden you find a voice. That voice is a treasure. It's so rewarding to find that and find that fulfilling part of yourself. So anyway, that's part of the next question was sustaining leadership. Again, feeding that leadership quality in a person and enabling that and checking in. Events like this or finding people of a similar heart, I'd say, it just fills your heart as well.
Thank you. I didn't know you were Alaskanos. Me too. I went up to Alaska. Yeah. I didn't know that about you. Sili kind of touched on it, and that's leadership. And so one of the questions we wanted to put towards the panel was, how, in your organization, how do you foster more leadership? How do you, sustain or try to recruit more leadership for your groups?
Okay, I'll start. So one of the ways is just get out of the way. When you're working in a nonprofit agency, a community-based organization, you're there because of the community. And figuring out how you're constantly thinking, what is the access that folks in this community have to this agency and what we do? And how do we, as individuals in that organization, not be barriers for folks who want to access services. And so again, really helping the staff feel affirmed on who they are. I mean, a lot of folks that we work with, especially in nonprofits, they're in a nonprofit because they belong to that community and they're great at what they do. And a lot of times we just need, as an organization, we just need to get out of the way of the leadership that you have present on staff. And again, believing in giving them the capacity in the room to be able to make decisions around a program or what you do, and trusting it. So we'll ask somebody for their idea, and then we'll hem and haw, and you get that look like, well, I don't know. But if that person has this life experience and they're from the community, you got to trust it. And you really have to push yourself to trust it, because a lot of us, especially in leadership roles, we are serious gatekeepers. And, we want things perfectly, and we want folks not to be, to go outside the box, outside the norm a lot. And, I'm pretty open, but, I know I'm a control freak around a lot of things. And so as much as we can create the environment for staff to know that they have the capacity and believing in the work that they do, I think for me as an organization, I think it's good. And when staff tell you that this is what should happen, you really need to figure out, okay, how am I going to be comfortable with this decision, and support them. Because everybody makes mistakes. We're not perfect.
Hello? Better? Is it me?
I think it's our side.
Hello?
I'll try to speak loud. I like supporting my friends in the business community whenever they have events, or if they have a platform and they're posting their activities. I'll just say one good example is my friend Vera Johnson from Village Green. She's very vocal, very good at saying what's on her mind. I was there for her when she was in the foreclosure situation. I was there for her. I tried to help her. Being from the real estate side, I tried to help her. And when she went to the top, I think she went to MSNBC, Wall Street Journal. I was there to support her. And I was very lucky when I went to school here. I was lucky to be mentored and mentor Denny Middle School youth for 4 years through ACRS. We had a program. So I really looked at that model and thought, really just be the support for people who want, to be lifted up. So just by teaching and mentoring, I learned a lot myself on how to also assist those people that are on their way up.
There you go. You got a hot mic.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Hey.
So, where I live, and there's a lot of condos now, so it's hard to break through the door unless you have,
Unless there's a big event, like a fire engine comes in, or like a few robberies have taken place. But what brings people out are in my neighborhood, are the environment. People feel passionate about the Al-Qaeda. people feel passionate about Alki, and they just want to do the best for the environment. So you go with that, and hopefully you get people that come out with the same interests and participate. They should work hard.
Yeah, it's already.
So I think that everyone's touched on it's the risk of sounding like redundant. I think we all were saying a lot of really similar things. The continuity, the respecting individuals' input, the mentoring relationships that we have. All of this drives leadership. I'm also kind of a big advocate for explicit succession planning for community organizations. The mentoring doesn't happen organically. And I think that's the danger for community organizers, that we think everything happens organically without a lot of deliberate, intentional planning. And I'm a very big advocate for intention. When we approach organizations we're not separate than, say, your corporate organization in the sense that we should have such disparate structure that we have very dissimilar ways of planning for the future. There are things to be learned from private sector organizations as far as how they plan for the future, how succession occurs, how mentoring relationships occur. The danger is when that one community leader, the one that we all rally around, the one that we all know, Ron Angeles, for instance. When Ron's gone, he may never go, but let's say Ron leaves. Who steps into Ron's spot? You don't replace Ron. That's never the goal. You're not trying to replace Ron. But you need the energy and you need the enthusiasm to continue. So who's that next person? Who steps into that role? Who's the stopgap when Ron moves on, when Ron wants to do something else? So for our organizations, community organizations, really fostering, and we talked about it at the high school and middle school levels, looking at those young people as leaders, but not just looking at young people as leaders. We sometimes have this kind of really hard focus on the youth as where the next tier of leadership comes from. But we have a lot of different types of leaders in our community. And they come from all different walks of life, age groups, cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And I think if we broaden our scope and definition of what leadership is, and who can do it, and what it looks like. For instance, not every organization needs an executive director, but so many organizations go around trying to find an executive director. They don't have the money for it, they don't have the time or resources for it, but they think they need an executive director. When you could fill it with maybe two very talented people who cost less money. Thinking differently about what leadership looks like, explicit leadership, informal leadership structures, thinking in those lines. We have a lot of resources, creative resources in our community. If we start tapping into them, and again, we have limited funds. So it requires that we think in interesting and different ways. And that's where, again, you take what you can from the private sector, you take what you can from the creative and artistic sectors, and you meld it into a community organization that works in a way that's effective and drives a lot of our initiatives forward. So, I said a lot of different things, but I definitely want to parrot what everyone said here. Very, very critical. But also really, if you walk away from nothing but what I said, is getting an explicit idea about succession planning, about mentoring in your organization. Critical. About thinking differently about what leadership structures ought to do, how they ought to function, what they ought to look like. Critical to make certain your organization is perpetuated into the future.
Thank you. Well, we're getting close to wrapping this part of Gathering of Neighbors up. However, before we conclude the panel, I wanted to ask Tom Whittemore, if he's here, if he would come up. Tom is with the Department of Neighborhoods, and speaking of succession planning and how do you replace Ron? One of the things that I was involved in before I left the Department of Neighborhoods was helps to put together a series of leadership development curriculum that will be offered to the community, and so we. Go ahead. We did that. Okay, we're having our first cohort of students go through this month. But I just wanted, Thomas from DON to talk just a little bit more about some of the things we hope to accomplish.
So you like what you heard?
Yeah.
Is this working?
No.
You like what you heard today? You enjoyed the training that's going on, the sharing of ideas. we really are trying to replicate that in a way through the collaboration through the department leaders and community. And we've been working on this for a couple years because we realized there is truly we're missing part of our mission at the department, not bringing in new leaders and helping them and supporting them. So right now we're working we set up the People's Academy for Community Engagement called PACE, and Ron is handing out a few brochures, and I have a few colored here. And we've got our first cohort of newly emerging, we're calling newly emerging leaders, and we asked around the city for word of mouth who is out there. It was getting back to the intentional planning. It's great to try to set up a succession program, but it's like you need some intentional work out of this across the city. Some of us are aging out, some of us are burnt out, some would love to have support and have created great organizations, but there's certain how do we continue, how do we build capacity? This is part of the effort to get at that, to work with people that are all different ages. We're not talking about just youth, we want them involved too, but this is the idea of bringing people that are all across the spectrum. We have 30 folks from across the city, we have all districts pretty much represented, and all from the north to the south. They're going to be with us for 7 sessions, 1 session a month, and they basically celebrate at the end. They're going to be working. It's a little different in terms of training because yes, we don't have instructors. We have facilitators. Facilitation is to stimulate conversation because we realize that everybody that's a part of this training is also bringing experience. They're not going to be sitting on their assets. We want them to also be sharing and to teaching each other. So this isn't talking heads, this is going to be sharing an active panel and group discussions. But at the same time, I realize that a lot of people have different ways of learning. So that means that we have a lot of information maybe in any particular 3-hour session each month. But between sessions, we're going to have a little homework. We're going to have people work with mentors. We're going to have community projects that they're engaged in. We want people to be very active throughout the year. And after the 7th session, we don't want them to just be disengaged. We're assuming that at least for up to a year, we want them to stay engaged with their mentors, stay engaged with each other. So basically, we have sort of a class sense of camaraderie between folks and want to bring folks back. So we hope to do this every year. We hope to double the number, hopefully, next year to include 60 people. And then, and advertisers. So we're going to need your help. We want people, if you see, again, if you think of yourself an early emerging leader, please apply. But if you know others in your organization which clearly have a lot of talent, but just have not quite figured out how to put it all together, we want to hear from them. So one other element I want to touch on, we're quite deliberate in making sure that not only they have geographic representation across the city, but we have a lot of representation of people who are from very diverse groups. So we're very deliberate, so we wanted to bring in, and you may not be familiar with the term, but we have what we call public engagement, well, they're now called public outreach and engagement liaisons. Those people are folks who are from the community, they may be bilingual, might be renters, seniors, people with disabilities, but they clearly are from groups that oftentimes have not had representation or significant representation, a significant voice in this city. We want to make sure those groups do. And to do that, we want to bring them into this training. So we are very deliberate in making sure they're part of this and that they're going to go out and also spread the word over time to their own communities, make sure everybody has a voice in this city. So with your help, hopefully we can engage over time, and we can also refer people to other forms of training throughout the year. This is not the only training, but we hope that this is a way we can get grassroots folks involved and keep it the People's Academy. So thank you for this time. We'll talk about it. And Ron, thank you. We actually have an advisory board, which is tremendous. Ron, Pablo, Chaz, we're all on the board. So you want to know more about it, you can also talk to them. So thanks so much.
Before we wrap up, just taking a quote from Hillary Clinton, or I think there was even somebody who even said it before Hillary. It takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes the whole community to cultivate effective leadership. So if you can take that away with you today, and let's have a.
I want to, if you have a chance for one of you. So, as I'm sitting here and I'm, the wheels are turning, Camp Long has a facilitation training coming up on May 19th through 15th through 19th on the challenge course. The challenge course, it's a team building thing, and it's a leadership training process, and it's about doing it through experience. And so work together, and then you
groups together. So if you have a staff person, if you have a free time because you're a volunteer, you can come to this 5-day training. What that means is that you can, once you get certified, you can bring your group onto the course for a much reduced fee because you are the and so you can facilitate your own groups. So if you haven't heard about it, let me know. 15th through the 19th of May.
Thank you. So one last